Hey, family. Thank you for tuning in to Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifa, where only the strongest roots see the light, brought to you by Botanica Candles and More. And if you haven't had the opportunity, please go ahead and tap on that subscribe button and be sure to share this video. Very excited about today's episode because we're talking about the gentleman on whom the Ifa oracle is based, right? Orunmila himself. Today is Ifa and Orunmila on today's episode. And to be able to speak about such a monumentous topic, I had to bring in another gentleman that is being regarded within the cyber Ifa and Orisha community as a source of knowledge. And apart from that, some of his accolades are he is the host of La Regla de Ifa y Osha YouTube channel, Awo of Orunmila, and apart from that, a veteran for whom all of us here thank him for his service, Mr. Shubert Awo Odi Leke.
Hey, many pleasures. Thank you for having me. Little boy Bucheche.
Schubert, it's a pleasure. We've been playing tag, we've been looking at each other for a while, and I'm happy we were finally able to collaborate. A lot of people have told me they wanted to see this, and it only felt right to make it happen.
No, definitely. I think nowadays it's more important now to adjust to this age, right? The age of how we grew up with our elders definitely needs to evolve based on the new generation. So I think it's important. It's vital.
That's awesome. And to find a like minded Awol, because it's not just us. You have so many brothers who are trying to advance, and not only that, but be a beacon of knowledge to their community, like Orunmila was. Finally, we're having the tools to reach the masses and make Ifa even more of a world culture than what it already has become.
No, absolutely, and I give it out to a lot of the brothers out there because I know a lot of people are really trying to adapt to the changes, especially in this world, right? And our global economic changes and everything else is going on around this world. It's challenging. It's challenging to kind of lead a community, to lead a spiritual house. So I definitely give it out to many of them, and again, accolades to you because again, we need people like us to kind of continue to kind of voice those things in a more digital friendly environment. So.
Right back at you, brother. And I think whether it was COVID, whether it's any of the various crises we've gone through in the past, I guess, 2 calendar years, it's let people know they need something more. And the spirituality is trying to provide answers in such a tumultuous time. And I think Ifa, at least within our community, definitely helped the mass to be able to get through pretty much unscathed, by way of our faith and practice.
No, 100% agree. Something that I think that really resonated with me in the last couple of years is we went through this kind of shift in the world when we start talking about diversity, and we're starting to see, the uptick of people trying to go back to, not to start the cliche, your podcast is the roots, right?
That's why we did the name
So
like that. Yeah.
so it was a beautiful thing just to kind of see how everyone is trying to manifest themselves and they're trying to evolve and they're coming back to this nature-based faith that is the Yoruba religion that is very beautiful. So I'm super excited to see what the next 5-10 years are going to happen and what the consensus looks like.
Absolutely. And talking about roots, it's time to get into yours. So, how long have you been a priest of Ifa, my brother?
So I initiated in January 15th of 2012.
Nice.
So I'm about to go on 11 years
Nice.
as I wore Orunmila. So definitely what an adventure, right? I think you could probably agree that when we first walk in, like many of us, we never read the fine print.
They
And
never
there was a
showed it
lot of
to
fine
us.
print. No, they did not.
But yeah, it is a journey. I haven't hit the 10 piece yet. A lot of the brothers around me in frequency are. It's a different vibe, they tell me. And, congratulations on your longevity, because that's an accomplishment in itself. To still have that fire to provide and to learn, to be able to still be doing that in 10 plus years, accomplishment in itself. And that kind of leads us to my next question is who initiated you? Who was able to bring you in?
Yeah, so very interesting story, right? So for me, my godfather was Miguel Alvarez, Baba Ifa, right? So he passed away a few
Condolences.
years back. Yeah, thank you. And my yobona is now my godfather, who is who's people. We call him people, but his name is William. And I did my Ifa in the U.S., right? But how I got to that point was just very interesting because I tell people all the time that I do what I preach, right? So I tell people, you have to kind of investigate and make sure you know who you're getting in cahoots with when you're in this faith, because you never know, what's gonna happen or who you're getting involved with. So you need to do a little bit of homework, and I literally was in Tampa, Florida, and I think I might have visited, let's say, 15 botanicas.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I was just flying by, but at this point, at a young age, at around 16 years old, I had already been familiar with the faith. So I kind of knew what the five oracles looked like. I knew what signs and embos needed to kind of sound like. I wasn't proficient, but I knew enough to say, I need somebody to give me mano de Orula, right? So that was my goal going in. And yeah, sure enough, I got to my godfather's botanica in Tampa, and sure enough, I got floored. I was wild. And the old saying is, seeing is believing. And there was definitely no doubt. I mean, in my heart, my mind, everything kind of just clicked, and boom. So yeah, definitely a great experience for Miguel Alvarez and all my brothers down in the Tampa and the Plant City area. So.
Is that where you did Ifa?
I did, yeah, I did it in Plant City.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Definitely a lot of space and definitely a high demographic. I tell you,
Oh
especially now, even not to get into the social aspect of things, when you see how high the rent is in Miami right now, you see all these brothers moving up to Tampa or Orlando. So it's really awesome because, back then, and maybe not so much in Tampa, but definitely here in Orlando, Babalawo was sparse. It wasn't that that saturation like Miami. What was Ifa like back then? I mean, and you say there were 15 botanicas. I mean, was there really a community over there even at that point?
yeah. So I would say when I got my mano de Orula, it was 3 years prior. So it was I just got stationed there, so I had to be '09 is when I got my mano de Orula. And in 2009, the community was different, right? Because you had a lot of spiritualism, but as you said, there wasn't Ifa was not the centerpiece, right? So to actually find someone who was actually gonna, throw the opeles and actually throwing and casting kines, so in order for us to get an Ifa oracle, it must have been from the 15, maybe four that I actually had a Babalawo sitting in front of me. So spot on. It was not that of there was not a deep community there. Now there was definitely a lot of spiritualism, I would say, in the Tampa area at that time.
Okay, wow, yeah, definitely common theme over here. Or where are you from originally?
So originally I'm from Newark, New Jersey, right? So I'm up at
Nice.
the Northeast. So I spent a lot of time up there. I want to say between the Bronx, Brooklyn, Newark, New Jersey area, primarily Newark, New Jersey, but I spent a lot of time in New York. That is honestly where my roots really began in this faith, right? Was in Newark. My mom would always go to the spiritual masses, and they would always be in a basement somewhere, somewhere creepy,
The
right?
basement
So
misas, yo, yeah. Only to be compared to the project misas, yo.
yeah, yeah, and yeah. So I mean, that's how I started to kind of just get a feel for it, which was very ironic because I was a Catholic school boy, right, growing up. And a lot of people are like, "What? You were a Catholic school boy?" Like, yeah, I even went through my sacraments and everything. And here I am. I said, but something Ifa teaches us, right? Religious tolerance is massive, right? And it doesn't put a shadow or a cast on anything. So it's definitely was an interesting transition. I'll tell you that.
I have to say, so much similarities even with myself, and it's gonna lead into our first topic so easily because, raised Catholic, born Catholic, right? My family's originally from Brooklyn, but they moved to Hialeah um, before I was born, so about 2 years, and then, raised there, baptized, etc. But people always ask me, how do you go from Catholicism to Ifa? And to be frank with you, I don't know what it was, but it called me, and then I felt really like it was an out of body experience when you're at church and you hear the priest talking different things, and then it's like, okay, but we're doing the chicken thing at night, so I'm kind of confused. So I'm not sure if that happened to you too or with the misa, but it's an out of body experience for a kid.
Oh my gosh. You mentioned that, and I can still remember the day. I must have been in the fourth grade, maybe, yeah, maybe the third grade. And I told my mom, I was like, "You're doing the stuff of the devil, right?" and I don't know any better, right? I'm
Of
just
course.
following what they're telling me, what they're teaching me. But it was just the same experience, right? And you go home and you try to relate those things. And then sure enough, right, that calling does come, right, and you feel that attraction, that energy is no joke, and you know that you're home when you're home.
Yes. Absolutely, and that, like I said, it leads us in because, we're talking about a guy, um, the best expression of priesthood, the best expression of, manhood, Orunmila, right? And I really just want to get into his backstory because a lot of people say, when we're talking about the oracle, we're talking about so many different stories about him, but what was his original like come up story like? What was his exodus? And it's really in the Odus, and I'm sure there's more, but the one I'm going to focus on is Ogundayekun or Ogundariku, as well as the Odu Oturadiyu or Oturairede. And what happened here is, Rumela, before he came down from heaven in either of these Odus, he was already preordained to be a Messiah, to be a leader, to be somebody that was going to spiritually clarify and expose. But, on that journey from heaven to earth, a lot of things get lost in context. So when he got here, he forgot, like we all do. And we're going to get into why it's so important to visit Orula first so we can be reminded as to what we're meant to do down here. And that's why Orumila is the first step. But Orumila started experimenting. He started practicing other religions. He traveled, he learned. And after experiencing all of them, he arrived at Ifa once again. And it speaks about the same thing you mentioned, the call, the energy, the feeling of being at home. And at that moment, he was able to fulfill his destiny by initiating into Ifa, becoming Babalawo, and beginning his practice. And not only that, but his mission of initiating others and showing the beauty and effectiveness of this philosophy, which leads me now to what drew you to Ifa? Was it the beads? Was it the bawalaos? Was it the chicken? Was it the pumpkin? What was it, if you can remember or cite a moment?
So I reflect on this a lot, and so for me, I didn't necessarily understand, because if you read the Odun Odi Leke, right, and you look at my sign, we start to talk about the relationship between the dog and the bull and doing too many favors, and the constant theme is favors, 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 right, and don't lose sight on the prize, which is why Odi Leke, Lekes, don't forget your bees because then they forget who you are.
Correct.
So when you look at that, and I reflect back, I've always had a yearn to help people, right? But I didn't know that it could be harmful, right? So at a certain point, we got to be reasonable on what we're doing, how we're helping, because everyone needs to sacrifice in their own way. So for me, growing up, it was always about family. It was always about community. I would even do knuckleheaded things as a teenager, right? With the streets and who I hang out with. But it was always, I was always there to jump and defend someone, whether they were right, wrong, or indifferent, right? So I started to kind of see that that was my behavior pattern, right? So then, I fast forward, and then now I'm in the military. I'm in another family. I'm getting more disciplined, and I'm jumping in front of more bullets, right, for more people, in order to ensure that we continue to kind of keep pushing forward. And then I joined a fraternity, right? So I'm a Freemason as well,
Oh, a
and in
traveling
that,
man. It's a pleasure.
yeah, I am. And so then. I get into this fraternity and start to kind of see how they start to perform ceremonies and have a brotherhood. And I'm like, man, I'm liking this. But the constant theme has always been the same: the brotherhood, the brotherhood, the brotherhood, and that includes sisterhood. But it always attracted me. That community has always attracted me. And then so it was no coincidence that now I'm a Babalawo, right? And now I'm an Awoni Orunmila leading an Ile, right? And I'm doing the same thing. I'm putting myself in front of people in order to provide a service so that I can help them, so I can guide them, so I can give them, whether it be through an Ifa oracle or maybe it's just some life lessons. But nonetheless, I'm still doing the same. So it's very weird how it transitioned, but it's always been the same theme.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you, Orunmila saves us. You know, Orunmila never leaves his sons abandoned. He always gives them the information they need to make the right decisions and live aligned. And you're serving humanity like we all swore to do, but you're doing it in a way now where you're being compensated appropriately, right? And that's the thing. We only change if we assimilate the philosophy. We never fully change because at the end of the day, it's our DNA. But we just start living our truth the way God intended, right? We're not meant to be taken advantage of. We're not meant to be used. We're meant to be esteemed, as gentlemen in this community. And it makes perfect sense. And you really are the classic Babalawo. And the reason I say that is because you walk the path. Back in the days, they used to make you do everything. Like my grandfather in Ifa, Neto Baratumu, he was everything. He was a palero, he was a Rosa Cruz, he was a mason, he was a abacua. They made him do everything just to be able to get into the last room because Orunmila has always been viewed as the epitome, in Cuba and in Africa, right? So you are the prototype of that generation. So it makes a lot of sense your trajectory, right? And it leads me now to, I mean, even in my personal experience, I remember the first thing that really caught my eye was the green and yellow combination, even before I knew who it represented. And when I heard about Orula the first time, I'm like, man, that's kind of what I'm looking for, I guess. Coming from a home, where there wasn't that masculine presence to a certain degree to kind of emulate what Orula represented: wisdom, tranquility, patience, etc. That's when I knew I wanted to learn more about this guy. So I asked, what was the first time, or when was the first time that you heard about Orula?
So I want to say I was about 15 years old. And I was in Newark, New Jersey. Again, another basement story because in New Jersey we love our basements.
Oh man, you need a
And
basement. You need it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so sure enough, he was a palero. He was a crown son of Elegua,
Nice.
and I don't know, I just resonated with this guy, and the guy would just have me do the weirdest things, right, in order to, and I had no clue about the faith, but I was just dabbling, right, but it was calling me. And sure enough, I remember going up to his house one day, and I saw the sopera, the vase of Orula, and uh, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, what is that? Right? And yellow, it's green. It had the collares on top of it." And he was like, "Oh, that's what told me who that I'm a son of Elegua." I had no clue what that meant, right? So that's all I got from him at that moment. And sure enough, just like any other person, I start asking questions, right? And so when my mom used to go to those masses that I told her were devil worshiping, now I love them, and I went to them.
Right in the
All
mix.
of it, yeah, right in the mix. And so I started asking people. I said, "Hey, who is the one that shows you who your guardian Orisha is? I want to know, right? I want to know what that's about." And then that's when the word Orunmila came out, and I said, "Orunmila." And from there, I knew that I needed to figure this piece out. This was the marker, right, of what I was kind of going for, because for some reason I was just intrigued, and I don't know why, but it called me out, right? And I went to it, and I kept going, I kept pushing, and to think it took from me being 14, 15 up to 2009 to actually get my mano de orula, my awofaka.
No, and I'll say the same thing. I mean, being from, whether it's New York or whether it's Miami, these are some of the cradles, if not the cradles of this practice in this country. For you to have to wait that long, it lets you know that when you are meant to be awo, there is that exodus period where you're finding yourself, you're searching, you're constantly striving for that knowledge. Just because something's meant for you doesn't mean it's going to be easy. And as I speak to a lot of brothers, at least the brothers that really delve into the philosophy and learn and practice, they have this similar story like us. Because me being from this area, I didn't receive Hand of Ifa until I was like 22, no, 18, and then did Orisha when I was 22, and then ultimately Ifa 6 years later is when I'm 23. You know, it is a pilgrimage to a certain degree. So I definitely resonate with that because it's very very similar to my story. But I guess do you remember that moment after delving into Orula, finding out this missing link? At what moment did you say, I have to follow this man? I have to emulate this man. I want to be like this man. I want to be a representative of him on earth. Do you kind of remember that moment where it was like, this is the guy?
Absolutely,
Nice.
because I remember I was in the shop, and so they pull your mano de orula and you get your old doom, and we start talking about it. And then you have all the elders that are there, and they all have a piece of the puzzle, right? And everyone's sharing their knowledge and they're sharing their wisdom. And they begin talking about, hey, he has to go to Ifa, he has to go to Ifa. Right. And then there was this one person out of the whole group, right? So maybe about, let's say 10, 11 Babalaos there. One person's like, no, he's got to get crowned. And I was like, okay, got to get crowned. Right. So we're working it. Right. And knowing enough at that moment that I didn't want to, and this was just my perspective being very young at that moment. I said, I don't want a piece of the puzzle. I want the whole puzzle. I want to be able to just dive right in. And I want Ifa, and I had that conversation with my godfather, and I said, no, this is what I want. I've never limited myself, and I've always been one to just want to just take life, and just grasp it, and just suck the life out of it as much as I can in order to take advantage of what's here and what opportunities are there. And I had that conversation with my godfather. I said, I really want to go to Ifa. And we had that conversation about privy ceremonies that we have to do in order to ensure that we're good to go.
Sure.
But it was that very moment that I knew, when that conversation was even asked in the room, that no, he needed to get crowned versus he needed to go to Ifa, that I had that conversation with my godfather after it was all said and done. Because, we respect our elders, and we listen to everybody, and we just stay quiet at that point.
Yes, sir.
And and obviously at that moment, I pulled my godfather later on and said, hey, Padrino, Ifa is what I want. You know what I mean? How do we make this happen? I'm not trying to break any rules, but it was that moment, right? So, yeah, I remember it clear as day. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing.
No, I resonate with that, my brother, because it's when there's the possibility of it being taken away that you know whether you really want something or not. When you heard, oh, the crowning, because if I recall, you're a son of Shango, correct?
Ache.
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of interpretations on that, but for the most part, you guys are going from one room and then to the next. So you guys got to walk the lands, right? So
Yeah.
it's at that moment when you realize when you might not be able to achieve something that you want it. And I think that drive comes in, and whether it's your DNA as a military man or just the progressive person you are, you're like, I have to make it. There is no other option. And we're all faced with that when we're trying to make it to that room, because it's like Oyekun Meji says, and when you're on the path to success, the obstacles only get greater. Eshu's going to test you to see if you really want it, and we go through the ringer. But for me personally, when I knew Orunmila was my guy, I could say it's two separate occasions, and each of them were equally impactful. I remember when I went to initiate into Orisha, when I was going to crown Oshun, I interacted with a Babalawo. He was Owani Chobe, and we were talking, and he told me about Agi that's in the Odu Otura Drubon, where Orunmila doesn't like pointless questions. And what he meant by that was, if you're gonna ask me something, make sure it's something that's worth, God's time, basically. And in that sign, the Babalawos would ask questions and get skewed answers from the chain, and it caused them to carry on a bunch of random behaviors. And they went back to Orula like, you lied to us. The chain told us to do this. We weren't supposed to do that. Why'd you tell us to do that? And he said, wherever there's logic is where you'll find me. If there's no logic, I'm not there. And that, when he told me that pataki, I was just like, dude, like, I'm all about logic. Like, 1+1 is 2, like the simplest and most like singular line towards a goal. Like, that just made the most sense to me at that moment, because I said, when we're talking about religion, anybody that's talking about logic to me is truly enlightened, because sometimes we have to put God to the side and we have to put the light and all the inspiration and really focus on the facts, because as divine as something may be, we still have to deal with the laws of reality and nature. And I said, this guy is, Orula's on another level. And then another moment for me is I was studying the Odurameji, where Orunmila interacted with, the people of Arabic descendancy. And, after interacting with Ifa, these gentlemen said, we appreciate Ifa for everything that it's done, for, giving us a path to walk, etc. But we still want to practice our indigenous faith over here. And Orula said, hey, as long as you fulfill with me, we're good. And at that moment, I realized that what Orunmila had told them was, even if you don't believe in me, you're not going to hell. And I said, this guy is so self-confident and so sure of what he's been able to provide and what he practices. It doesn't even matter if people don't use this as their base practice. They're still going to get a benefit, and they're still going to be, considered. So when I heard these kind of things, I said, there's something about this man. I have to learn more from him. I have to follow. I have to see where this rabbit hole goes, because the way he's speaking, and he's not even here. This is just through, oral tradition. This is too epic, So, it was very impactful for me. So I'm not sure if some of the conversations you would have with your elders, like, you're sitting around these guys that you emulate and you hear them talking, dropping so much knowledge on us, were there moments like that for you where you're just looking around like, man, you guys are it?
So I would say there was multiple events, even till today, where I like to try to keep a community of elders. At a moment's notice, you got to be able to pick up a phone and call someone,
Sure,
right?
sure.
And so I have a couple of WhatsApp groups, right? Because WhatsApp's the thing. And
Mm-hmm.
in those groups, I mean, it's just hearing the conversations that are being had, the questions and the deep thought, right? The deliberate questions that come out. I think it resonates every single time, right? And then there's some times where I'm like, and I don't know about you, like I'm like, my OD needs a break because I'm
Yeah.
overwhelmed. Hold on, time out, right? And at that very moment, right, you take that breather and you're jumping right back in. And I think it's that dedication that kind of reminds me of the pataki you mentioned, because turamei, something that I always like to mention over and over again is the religious tolerance part.
I
It's
say.
just, it doesn't matter, I don't, whether or not you believe in one thing or another. Let's not mix it with a lifestyle that all leads to God at the end of the day,
Yes, sir.
right? That believes in the nature of things. And I think that's something that a lot of people lose. So the Pataki spot on, Duramei, right? And yeah, and the people of Mecca, absolutely. Buddha boy, Buddha.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when I heard it, and then, mind you, I had these conversations before I was Babalawo. So when I actually, and Orula leads you to the part of the literature that you need most at that moment. And when I found both patakis, I said, "Oh my God, this is where you were trying to lead me to the whole time." Because when you find it yourself and you're able to read it and just enjoy it and nourish yourself with it has a whole nother impact than just hearing it from somebody else. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so um and this question actually came up this week, what we're going to delve into now. Because why are we doing this? We're doing this to guide, we're doing this to clarify. And a lot of people, um they ask, why is Orula the first step? Why the hand of Ifa? And it's a pataki that, has been mentioned quite a bit, and it can be polemic depending on how people interpret it, who's listening, who's telling it. But in the Odu of Osa, it speaks of where Obadala was the owner and manipulator of the Erindilogun, or the shells, right? The cowries. And he would perform consultation, and he would also identify people's Orisha Labadori, or their head Orisha. And ironically, every time he would do this, someone would come out a son or child of Obadala. Now, this was cute in the beginning, but as time went on, the other Orishas were like, man, if we don't have children, if we don't have followers, we don't eat and we don't prosper. So Shango, being the outspoken gentleman that he is, he just, he can't keep it to himself when he sees something not going right. He went and checked his father. He said, Baba, I don't know what's going on, but things are very convenient for you lately. Everybody that comes to your mat comes out your child, and we're over here starving. I haven't had a ram in a year. So Badala chastised him for his insolence and said, who are you to tell me this, that, and the third when I'm the one who owns the shell? And Shango said, well, it's easy to see now that you're doing something unethical. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go let Olodumare know. And Obatala was like, go ahead. He can't take the shell away from me anyway. What's done is done. So when Shango goes to Olodumare's palace and he presents his case, Olodumare said, hey, right or wrong, he's right. I can't take the shell away from him. I already gave it to him. And Shango said, well, the thing is, if you just want the religion to be called Obatala, keep going how you're going, because we're all going to die. And Olodumare said, well, if you bring a problem, bring a solution. What do you suggest? And Shango said, we need somebody that's unbiased. We need somebody that isn't going to anybody's head. We need somebody that doesn't care who comes out a child of who. And I proposed my younger brother, Orula. Olodumare had heard about him, but he knew he was a young guy. He knew he was new on the scene. He said, well, bring him forth and let me see what he's about. When Orula presented himself in front of Olodumare wasn't impressed from a physical standpoint. Orula was flaco, he was a skinnier guy, he didn't have these imposing features like all the other Orishas like Ogun, Shango, Chosi. But he started asking him questions, and Olodumare instantly realized after, 20 minutes that this kid, was his personal expression. That the way Orunmila spoke was the way Olodumare spoke. That's why Ifa is the word of Olodumare. So at that moment, he called Obatala forward, and he didn't accuse him of anything, but he said, based on things that have been brought to my attention, these are how things are going to be. So he told Orula, I have good and bad news. Good news, the bad news is you're not going to get crowned to anybody. So it doesn't matter where it is, Orula doesn't go to anybody's head. But the good news is you're going to be who identifies who goes to everybody's head, right? And your sons will belong to you in a different manifestation, right? And he looked at Obadala and he said, your shell, it's yours, but you have to teach everybody else how to use it as well, because everybody here has to live. Obadala wasn't happy that his son had just replaced him, for his job, but with this came balance, right? And this is why Orunmila is the one who identifies the Orisha Labadori and also identifies destiny, right? So I ask you, Shubert, do you ever get those questions? Why is Orula first? Why the guardian angel? Is this something that you have to, is this pataki something you got to relay over and over again?
And we both chuckle, right? Because I'm probably on a weekly basis we're
Yeah.
talking about the same topic, and over again, and it's a very problematic topic depending on the lineage that you come from, because I believe my lineage, is going to be true. But however, as time evolves, we mature and we get a little bit more humble to the point that, you know, right and wrong don't necessarily mean right and wrong. Because if foundationally we're trying to achieve something, and we have the good intentions, no different than an Oya Kung Fu, we're going to succeed. We're going to get to where we need to get to.
Muru.
Now, in my experience and what I've seen, I think it's very critical for Ifa to be the first step, and that pataki, that odun is something that in Maile we talk about a lot, because it's how we determine how do you go to the next land, right? How do I understand what your Ori is asking for and what it urges for and where you need to walk and talk, and the only way I can guide that is to know what your Ori wants. And your Ori needs to tell me who's accompanying you, right? So your Batori is vital for us to kind of understand. And that will supplement your next passages if you go to Ocha, because then you got Koya ceremonies, etc., etc. So those things are super vital. Additionally, how do we manage to help someone in their destiny if we don't have a clear sight picture? And I tell people all the time, Ifa is a puzzle, and one of those vital pieces is la batori. And when after we know the batori, then we can start to put the rest of the pieces together, because that's where we begin to kind of build your spiritual journey, your road. So like you mentioned in the Pataki, I think it's very important to have an unbiased party. It makes sense. It's logical. It's spiritual. It is lineage specific for many. But we are having that conversation. But I will leave with a disclaimer that just because you got crowned and you didn't get mano de Orula doesn't necessarily mean that those processes were wrong. You just went
Not at
about
all.
it
Not
differently.
at all.
Yeah.
I mean, we're so respectful on this end. I mean, when people come and they're like, "Hey, I have Orisha crowned," I'm like, I'm not asking that again, at all. You know, this
Ache.
that's just. Orunmila said in Odura Drubon, I don't want redundant questions. I think ultimately, no matter the oracle that was used, I don't think Ifa or Orisha is cruel enough to identify something that's not coherent for that person.
Ache.
The thing is, obviously, if they crowned it, they were meant to crown it. What we want to eliminate is any doubt, right, or any ulterior influence. So that's why Orunmila speaks once and he speaks firm. Like Ikafa says, his word is his word. So, it's just to give people that certainty. So, when we're talking about now, people are coming in, right? They're getting initiated. They're finding out who they are. That spiritual journey that you mentioned. Um, a lot of people have expectations, right? Everybody comes to Ifa for different reasons. Some people come for health. Some people come for legal situations. Some people come for wealth. They're looking for money. They think Ifa is, gonna give them all this money. Whatever it may be. Expectations are big. So, there's a pataki or a verse that I remember my Yubona sent to me when I initiated into Ifa, because he wanted to make it very clear what Orunmila was going to provide. And when you read this verse in Irete Meji, it's literally Orunmila speaking to, one of his godsons who asked him, "Hey, why haven't I become rich yet? Why am I not healthy? Why am I not this, that, and the third if Ifa promises all these things?" And Irete Meji, or his Baba Ifa, responded to him and said, "You are to expect nothing other than the efforts that you put towards your goals and your study of this philosophy to better your life." And when I read that verse, I realized very quickly what my Yubona was trying to teach me: study and you'll be free, study and you'll be healthy, study and you'll be wealthy, whether it comes in the form of a dollar or whether it comes in the form of wisdom, right? And you being somebody that, has been in this culture, just as long as I have, what are you experiencing with expectations from people, and what do you think people should expect from Orula or not expect from Orula?
So something that I always tell anyone that comes forward is, Ifa is a lifestyle, right?
Ashe.
Ifa is not a fad. It's not something that we're going to do now in order to get, quick results, right? It reminds me of those fad diets, right? So, but people have that expectation, and that image is out there, right? Because they see successful people not knowing that they've endured, that they've sacrificed, they've done things to get themselves in a certain position, and a lot of times it had nothing to do with an ebo, right? It just meant that they studied, they work hard, they changed their lifestyle, their character, and they started to mesh into the concepts of iwapale, right? Just being a good person overall. And so I would say that yes, there is a 50%, right, where we have folks coming towards us saying, hey, what can Ifa do for me versus what can I do for the world?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely very profound, brother. My next question for you, Schubert, is, obviously you've been able to put out a nice amount of content. When you speak with logic, you speak, in a polished form. You could see that you've put in the time to be able to get to the point you're at. What keeps you motivated to keep studying, brother? What after 10 years, what motivates you to open that book wherever it is, or read that proverb, or watch that video? What keeps you going?
So that's a fully loaded question. So I don't know where to begin, but I'm gonna try with this. Ifa is so complex that I can only describe it as a spider web, right? Ifa is the center, but when I start to follow that string, I start to find myself in philosophy and numerology, astrology. I find myself in so many different places. I'm trying to understand animals and why animals act certain way, and why is that animal the preferred animal for a certain Orisha, and what results do I get from this animal versus this one, and why do people act like animals sometimes, right? So you start talking about that, and then you start figuring out, what are these herbs? What is this ewe thing, right? And why does this call, and why is this medicine, and why is this one a something to remove, and why is this one something to cleanse, or something to advance, right? Or something to bring you some form of blessings, or medicine itself to heal you. And it's just so complex that I think I'm so intrigued with trying to learn as much as I can before, Iku meets us at the gate.
Yeah.
That, it's just, if I can figure out a magical way to not have to sleep and eat and just study Ifa, I
Oh yeah.
probably would jump at it.
That's
But
that's it, man. That's it. If we didn't have to, man, God, it's
it's
a it's
definitely
it's a passion. It's an obsession to a certain degree. Like when you're learning at bowl, or when you're learning, you realize the amount of repetition, how old world academics was. It really is tedious, but its fruits are so sweet. It's like Juanita Anchela says, the roots of Ifa are bitter, but the fruits are so sweet. And the reason I ask you this is because to go into Orunmila, right? Orunmila was identified as the only being to ever know Ifa to perfection. He knew Olodumare's voice to perfection, the only one. And in the Odu of Osarete, was where Orunmila was gifted 16 barrels of knowledge by Olodumare himself. He says, I want me and you to have a personal relationship where you know me to perfection. So it's going to involve you drinking the liquid in these 16 barrels. Orunmila said, well, I'm going to try and drink them all in one day. But when he tried to do that, he almost split his bladder in half. So he said, let me slow down a little bit. So what he would do is every day he would consume a teaspoon of this knowledge just to be able to handle it all. This was like spiritual plasma or something. And with time, it's not really identified in the Odu, it just says time. Orunmila was able to make it to the end of the 16th barrel. And just when he was about to take that last teaspoon, Elegua, being Elegua, caused a commotion so that the barrel tipped over. When the barrel tipped over, the liquid fell on Orunmila's wooden plank floor. And the wood, also realizing how knowledgeable Orunmila was trying to suck the knowledge as well. So Elegua, realizing what was happening, he licked first, right? And then called the other Orisha saying, Orula, drop some of the knowledge. And they all clamored into Orula's house and started licking his floor. And when Orunmila looked at them, he said, that's perfectly fine. By the time they got there, I had already consumed everything practically. But that's what we're talking about with wisdom and study. When we analyze this pataki, Orunmila would sip Ifa little by little every day. When we sat down with Baba Bobola, he said something that a lot of my Omoawos were really shook by, because he said if you leave Ifa for 2 days, he leaves you for 2 weeks. And my godsons were like, yo, we started studying during the interview because we're not trying to have that. So hearing you with your motivation to study, and then realizing how wise Orunmila was, and why we have no time to waste when it comes to learning Ifa. We have to every day, even if it's an ounce, because we're family men, we're professionals. If we were only so lucky to not have to sleep, eat, and do other necessities, we'd be sipping all day, right? But we live under capitalism, so it's just, that's what my motivation is. When you hear a pataki like that, it's like I'm just trying to make it to Orula's heels, because that's really where the other Orishas were. They were licking on his floor, they were by his feet. So we're just trying to get there, you know. So very like eye opening, um, pataki, and you know, it leads us into our next topic. My brother, it really is a pleasure to be sitting with you because of all the wonderful things I've heard. You know, when we came in, and you know, when you come into Ifa, you do Ifa, you know, you got love for the brothers, but everybody's trying to, you know, they're trying to do their thing. Like, yo, I threw the Oche Bile here, I did the Rooster de Legua here. Like, everybody in the Ifas, you know, they're trying to get their little spot, you know what I'm saying? And it's a beautiful thing because it leads to this goal that we're trying to achieve. But you know, how important do you think is, and us providing this example by being together now, how important do you think it is for Babalaos to collaborate rather than compete?
Whew, I think it's super important. When you look at and there's this old pataki that talks about the Tower of Babel,
Ashe.
right? And you see what happens when everybody does something in a singular form, and they don't allow the diversity of others to come around. In that pataki, we had the dialects, we had the languages that were switched off, and everybody now was now speaking different languages, which brought down the tower. Okay, so the lesson there is there's so much to learn, and if it was designed for everyone to work in a stove, in a pipe, and we were all just going to work in that one direction, I don't think we would accomplish anything. I think we will be no different
Oro.
than the Tower of Babel.
Correct.
So for me, absolutely, I think it's super vital that no matter what brother it is, and we go back to that fine print when we became Awoni Orumilas, we are brothers, and we need to rely on each other. We need to be able to pick up the phone and at a moment's notice help each other, because ultimately you helping that Babalawo is that Babalawo being a force multiplier to help his community, and we should be able to be there. So we have to come together.
And I think the beautiful thing is from the very beginning, like with the pataki that's in Osarete, is that none of us are ever going to be Orula. We have the ego check
Sure.
from the very beginning. Like, if at the end of the day, we're all in this crab bucket just trying to be like Baba, and we're never going to get there anyway. So let's help each other out of this bucket. And, you know, I really lean back on the Odu Ofumbile, because Ofumbile says, Los Babalaos se reúnen, the Babalaos, we get together. And what happened here is the Babalaos were lonely. They were all separate and they were doing their own thing. And, you know, it speaks of a time when they were miserable and they weren't getting any results and things weren't going well. So they all consulted Ifa, and all of them came with the Odu Ofumbile, where Orunmila all told them the same thing: get together. You know, you're all my children. I want to see you together. The only way Elah and the spirituality of Ifa will flow is when you guys are together, you know? And they all started, you know, visiting each other. And they realized they were able to get results. They were able to feel better. They had a good time. Um, you know, and they realized from that point forward the Babalawo cannot be one. You know what I'm saying? It's like when an Iking falls and we pick it up with another one, Awo Shubu, Awo Dide, you know, one Awo helps another. From the very conception of Ifa, Ifa is telling us we have to be together because one Iking can't pull an Odu. You know, we need 16 of them. So, you know, it really it leans back on that, and what you're saying couldn't be any more, you know, coherent. We need each other. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, how many times has there been a situation where it's like things have gone so well, you know, just from interacting with a brother, that new pataki, that good interaction, you know, just being at the Ifa sometimes, being with the old guys, that fraternity, you know, do those memories, you know, do they live on within you, you know? Can you recall those moments when, you know, we had that great interaction?
So quite a few, right? So and I take this back from my godfather. My godfather, obviously, when we do ifas, everybody's in union, and then on the last day we're at the table.
Ashe.
And in the Lukumi lineage, right, we sit at the table and we eat together and we break bread together, and we're coming together. But it's those very moments that you begin to realize as you're hearing the prayers around the table, right, and you start to focus on. wow, everybody is saying something different, but they're bringing something to the table.
Word. That's what it
and
is.
and in that very moment, right, you start to kind of figure out that the way you see life and the way you interpret Ifa is going to be different than how I interpret Ifa. But can we complement each other? Absolutely. Now imagine if we did that with 16 brothers.
Yeah.
Whew.
It's powerful. And that's really what it is. You know, when you have an energy like this that's so alive and you have all these priests, all this professionalism, and to be able to get that in harmony, especially, with all the testosterone and stuff that might be floating around, if we can put that to the side, the amount of things we'd be able to accomplish. And you see the effects of that just by, a positive Ifa ceremony and a positive interaction. And it really leans back on Orumila's personality. I mean, this guy, he was the perfect example because he was so self-confident that he really didn't presume himself. He was good wherever he was, and as we delve into the different aspects of his personality, the first one would be his humility. Ifa is humility. If Orunmila is wherever logic is, he's wherever humility is as well. When you look at the Odu of Otura Ira, where he lived in a shack and the king had to come and bow his head before Orumila's tray to be able to save his daughter's life. Or if we look at Orumila's elegance in the Odu of Osala Fobeyo, where he courted Oshun, or in Ogunda Meji, where he was a beloved teacher, who wanted to see his disciples excel. I ask you, Shubert, what was Orumila's most appealing characteristic to you? What did you look at about this man and be like, that's the guy, that's who I need to emulate. That's a father. That's a mentor.
I think at that moment, I have to kind of go back right to the beginning stories and Osamare, he taught us a lot and from the Isese traditions as he
Actually,
interpreted, Baba Yobe. And I always go back to the how Orula handled Ogun and Olokun when he came down after they recreated the earth a couple of times. And at that very moment, when he's like, hey, you know what, I'm sorry, I'll take that hit. I should have came to you and I should have told you that I was going to the earth, not to outdo you or anything like that. But it was that very moment where you start to kind of see that no matter what challenge Orula faced, right? Because Orula faced plenty before that and plenty after.
every sign.
He always, yeah, he took it with grace. And he was like, there's no problem that was too big. I'm just going to go to Ifa. I'm going to find a solution. I'm going to do the Ebo one way or another. And he succeeded because he followed that simple routine. May have more complications towards the end, but it's a simple routine nonetheless.
Yeah, when you look at every five verse, it's like Orula did divination or divination was done for him. This was the message. Did the Ebo, had great results. And, Chetura says, Ifa is so simple, the why is complicated, and I tell you, you talk about his elegance and you talk about the way he faced adversity. There's this pataki in the Odu of Otura Riku where Shango was rambunctious, right? And he would had this beautiful white horse and not drive, he would ride it by, elderly people and try to scare them and just scare everybody in the town. And there was one guy he could never scare. And this really frustrated him, but after a while he gave up. But he noticed after interacting with this gentleman, he started feeling off. Like the horse wasn't feeling well, he wasn't feeling well. So he went to visit his brother Eshu. And he said, I'm not feeling well, so I need to figure out what's going on. And he said, well, do you know who Orula is? And Shango was like, nah. He's like, well, he's the Babalawo. Maybe you should go visit him and get some clarity. And he went over there, and when he looked, he was like, yo, this is the old guy I've been trying to scare. And Shango, being fresh, he was like, why aren't you afraid of me? And Orula looked him in the eyes and said, when you've seen death, there's nothing to fear. And Shango was floored. He was like, man, I've made huge mistakes. How do I be like you? How do I apologize? How do I make amends for all the negative things I've done? And Orunmila basically in that Odu was one of the Odus where he initiated Shango as a man of Ifa, and Shango was able to to change his ways. So I think I resonate with you, brother, and I agree with you that Orunmila, no matter what was presented to him, he never lost his cool. He never lost his suru, his patience, and he just took it in stride like great fathers do because you know your kids, God bless them, you love them, but it gets to a point where we interact with them on a level where we have to allow them to learn on their own and then allow them to come back and see, hey, the wisdom was there the whole time, whether it's our god kids, whether it's our children. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful story in that regard. I ask you, Shubert, with the same way that Orunmila taught a huge lesson to Shango, what has been the biggest lesson that Orunmila has taught you, brother?
I think patience, right? I think
Yeah.
patience was not one of my strong suits coming in. Some of the things I've explained to you already, how I even came into the faith, you kind of saw I was like a bull in a china shop. I was going all in.
Yeah.
There was no stopping me, right? So, how ironic is it that I'm Odi Leke, right? So, so,
We
so,
are nothing more than our Odu. I tell you.
so yeah, Orula definitely he humbled me in the sense where patience is able to give me the clarity to truly make informed decisions in life. It gave me time to kind of sit back and let's think about some things and let's make some deliberate decisions. Let's ask deliberate questions, and that goes for both my lifestyle in both spiritual and physical and emotional. Because even in my relationships, that's something that has helped me tremendously.
No, Rumila makes you better in all aspects. People ask me all the time, Baba, what is this ebo good for? Every ebo is good for everything. Because Orumila identified if something's lacking, everything's lacking. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have someone to lay next to, that means nothing. If you're the smartest person on earth, but you don't have, the social intelligence, love, things like that, it's really for nothing. So the Ebo is for everything, and the philosophy has to affect us in every way. That's why Orumila and Ifa is so impactful, and he's able to speak on it because he went through everything. He went through divorce, he went through loss, he went through bankruptcy, he went to jail, he did it all, and that's why men like us, people like us who have checkered pasts are able to look at him and be like, I know you're not going to judge me. I know you're just going to advise me. I know you're just going to educate me, and things are only going to go better. And, in the Odu of Ikafung, Orumila saw that the Babalaos were making mistakes. They didn't know what to do. They were looking for that guidance, but they still had that ego, like you were saying, the young bull syndrome. But it got to the point where things were going so negatively, they had to go see their father again to get that clarity. And they asked him, they said, do you have anything that we could follow to be able to lead a better life without having to pester you? And Orumila looked at them and he said, by no means are you a pester. By no means are you an annoyance. At the end of the day, a child must always look for their parent, because there's going to be things you need that clarity on, whether it's your partner, parent, etc. And he said, I leave you these laws. And if you live by them and you believe in Ifa and have blind faith in Ifa the same way you do in your watch, you'll never be able to fall by the wayside. And when we look at the 16 laws of Ifa, what does it say? Don't mistreat the weak. It says, don't delve into ceremonies you don't know how. Don't act like something you're not. And it's held true for over 5,000 years. So I ask you, Shubert, how have Ifa's teachings and laws helped you lead a better life?
I believe that the 16 mandates that you mentioned are definitely guides that you can definitely expand on.
Super
And I
key.
think, yeah, I think that me personally, it has helped me kind of again relook life in a different perspective, in a different light, right? It's not something that's so rigid that it's going to be like, hey, if you do X, X is going to happen. No, it just says, hey, listen, if you learn to kind of be this better person and you learn to live a lifestyle, then good things happen. And I will be honest with you, there was a point in time where I did not follow those mandates. I was not a very good practitioner at that point. I was doing foolish things. But the moment that I was able to kind of turn that around a little bit, and honestly give it a true look and say, you know what, I need to make a lifestyle change. Those 16 mandates probably saved me. Those
Ashe.
16 mandates probably even put my wife in my path. So I can only say great things. And I can only say that those 16 mandates allow me to also give those guidelines and say, hey, to others, even within my ile, to say, this is something that is a guide for you. And once you start to kind of shift that lifestyle, you'll begin to kind of see the positive changes that you want to see in your life. So 16 mandates, spot on.
Orula gives you what you're prepared for. And I'm sure you've had, it's like when that wonderful woman came into your life. And even before we started recording, what did we say? It takes a
Yeah,
very special type of woman to be with a Babalawo, right? God bless these
that's
women
it.
that tolerate us working these long nights, studying, coming home, covered in blood, God bless. All these things, very special women. And, Orunmila puts in your path what you're prepared for, where when you make these changes out of nowhere, the blessings come because Orula knows what you're ready for so that it doesn't destroy you. And one thing you said just now that I love is that you do give these to your godchildren, right?
That's it.
Because they need to know. It's not the same coming from us as like, yo, this is what actually Orula left for us. And it's not just you guys following it. I have to follow and walk this line as well. And it's one of the first things, if not the like, if somebody comes to us like, I want to do Orisha, I want to do Ifa, really the priesthood aspect of things. That's the first thing I give them. I said, look these over. Make sure before we have this second conversation that you're ready to sacrifice your wants for the need to follow this, this code of conduct because it ends well for those that follow it and not so much for those that, stray away. So I love that you provide that to your house as well. Um, I'm gonna bring it full circle with this one, man. Might get a little emotional, but that's what I love. If you had the chance to look Orula in the eyes, what would you say to him at this point?
I think definitely two things. Man, you said emotion. I didn't think I was gonna get emotional, but
It's big, man. It's big. You're looking at
yeah,
you when you're looking at him, and you just realize the magnitude of energy you have in front of you. It can get there.
yeah. I guess one would be thank you, right? You definitely
Ashe.
got to say thank you, just for the sake of providing us with a roadmap, right, to knowledge and understanding, so that we can be wise. That'll be the first part. And then the second part is going to be a little bit selfish, but I'm going to ask him, how did you figure out how how did you figure it all out? How did you get it all in there, right? I'm not immortal, but how did you do it? Help me
Yo.
understand, because I don't know about you, but there's times where it's like squirrel, right? You start studying and you're really hardcore in one, and something drags your attention somewhere else, and you don't get to truly divest this one thing you were working on.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it
Yeah.
happens all the time, brother, because it's like you said, it is a spider web. The old guys would say that, if I una tela araña, like you get lost in it. And I think that's why we have to come back so many times because we always miss something and it takes generations for us to be aligned to where it's like, hey, now you're in the Hall of Fame. You don't have to come back down no more. You know what I'm saying? That's what we're working towards. My brother, you have all my respect and all my accolades. You are a wonderful representation of our spirituality and our fraternity. I'm so happy I didn't have to do this video alone and this topic alone because people were asking me for an Orula video for a minute. And I said, man, I'm going to need some help with this one. And I'm so happy you were able to provide that support and make the time to be with us. You have all of our gratitude from, Our Roots podcast, Botanica Candles and more, and me, myself. Did you want to leave any words for your viewers, my viewers, our viewers before we kind of wrap it up?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is thank you to you and the team
Salud.
for continuing to push forward. Right, let's spread the good word. Two, definitely to my Ile, yours, and the world at whole. Don't fear the unknown. I think it's time to take life by the horns. And at the end of the day, it might be a metaphor for me because I'm Odi Leke, but um, but you got to do right by you, right? Find your spiritual alignment, because I think there's nothing more important in life than believing in something. I don't care what you believe in, but you got to believe in something. With that said, my wife, I love her half to death. So
Pete
Lexi,
Biboru.
Apeti Biburu,
Mm-hmm.
and all my god kids, and my godson, Sarafobio. I got a godson, Sarafobio.
Ashe.
So yeah, but definitely, to all my Orishas, Aleyos and Olorishas, Buru Iboya Bucheche.
I think they're gonna want a part two, brother. I'm gonna want to do that
Hey,
one in person though, man. Can't wait to meet, and it's gonna
yeah.
be just as epic, if not more. But thank you once again, man. Iborui boya. Our roots family, right? A couple things I want to mention. If you like any of this gear, if this merchandise, attracts you, please visit Botanica Candles and More, where you can find all of these articles of clothing as well as all of the things you need to be able to practice Ifa and Orisha. If you're interested in our spiritual mentorship program, Ifa classes, consultations, etc., whatever you need, that's the place you want to visit. Please be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share on this video, or share this video. Our Roots Podcast. Thank you for watching with Joseph Baba Ifa. Where only the strongest roots see the light. Brought to you by Botanica Candles and More. And until next time, family, see the light.